Welcome once again to our study of Omniscient Jigme Lingpa's Kangyur Rinpoche Treasury of Precious Qualities with the commentary by Kangyur Rinpoche, Longchen Yeshe Dorje. And as always, kindly begin with generating the mind of bodhicitta, the mind of wishing to establish all beings at the level of perfect enlightenment. Actually, I'd just like to do a sound check. Is the sound all right? So sound is fine? Good. Thank you very much. All right. Well, we are presently looking at the chapter on the four wheels, which are then the circumstances which enable us to practice successfully. So we looked at the circumstance of finding a place that was conducive, and now we're looking at how to attend to a teacher, identifying first what a teacher doesn't look like, what kind of teacher we want to stay away from. Then the teacher, the qualities of the teacher, and then also the qualities of the student. We looked at that last time. So now we're looking at how to serve and follow the teacher. So sloka 38 reads, riches, if you have them, offer to your teacher the fourth jewel, who should be served and reverenced in word and deed. Never will such actions go to waste, and of the three ways to delight a teacher, practice is best. So the first is that we could offer riches if we have those. The second is to serve the teacher with body, speech, and mind. And the best way is to put the teacher's instructions into practice. Thank you. I have somebody who's really good with the things that I forget. So kindly, this person is invoking, rather asking if we could please do the invocation first. Thank you so much for remembering that. That is absolutely essential. Yes, let's by all means do that. So thank you. The source of love and compassion for all beings, who knows all that is knowable, emanation of Longchenpa, heir to a treasury of mind treasures, sky-like yogin of the vast expanse of luminosity, Jigme Lingpa, at your feet we pray. So thank you very much for remembering that, because that is actually really important. Anyway, I'm probably going to get kicked out of the instructors union for my just unacceptable sort of forgetting what really is essential. So it's so true, actually. Seriously important to remember these things. So yeah, so these are the three ways that we generally think in terms of how to serve a teacher. Okay. Now, the commentary then. Spiritual teachers are embodiments of the three jewels. Indeed, the Guru is the fourth jewel. In the Sarva Buddha Samaya Yoga Tantra, it says, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Added to these, the teacher is the fourth jewel. And Guru Rinpoche says, the teacher is the Buddha, the teacher is the Dharma, the teacher is likewise Sangha, the peerless all-accomplisher. The teacher is glorious Heruka. So this we see quoted in many different ways. And this is, of course, where we understand the teacher is essential. Everything that we really can understand in terms of the application, the embodiment of the principles of truth, in terms of the Buddha embodying truth, living it, and then the actual medicine itself, the teachings of the Buddha, and the way that this is applied and followed. In terms of somebody manifesting in the world, all this is embodied in the teacher, and thus the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha are embodied in the teacher. So thank you. So finally, first, if one possesses material wealth, it is extremely important to make offerings. So that's where we offer what we can. And of course, some might not be able to offer much, but there is this culture of really prioritizing the teacher, not just as somebody that we sort of make some, whatever we got left over, we'll give it to the teacher. But in Buddhist cultures, there is really this practice of making that a big priority among lay people, and of course, particularly among serious students. Kangyur Rinpoche says, even though the teacher has no need or desire for offerings, you should offer him or her everything that you like most. It is said in the Chido, my kingdom and my body, my children, spouse and wealth, my best possessions that I cherish most, I offer to the Holy One. Limitless merit accrues from this, for it is the teacher who introduces you to the Dharmakaya of the Buddhas. The Gompa Duba says that offerings made for thousands of kalpas to thousands of Buddhas cannot match a thousandth part of a single drop of sandalwood oil offered for the anointing of a single pore of the teacher's body. If you are poor, a small offering made with a perfect and sincere attitude will equally perfect the accumulation of merit. It is important to make an offering proportionate with what you have. And there is this story also, like in Words of My Perfect Teacher, of this child that just sort of saw a Buddha and just threw some peas, I think, something small and insignificant. And then, but on the basis of that, this child had pure perception of this teacher. On the basis of that, then having later a very, very fortunate rebirth. So it says, second, in order to serve the teacher and show respect, one should perform any necessary physical action, from household chores and practical tasks of stitching and preparing a seat to make gestures of reverence with your hands joined. One should speak up for whatever the teacher requires, and in relation with his or her teaching of the Dharma, one should do whatever is necessary by way of explanation and so forth. So the first thing that the best we can run, no, not the best we can offer. The least we can do is offer wealth to the best of our ability. The second is to then actually be engaged with serving the teacher with body, speech, and mind. So that's where we're then presently speaking about how to, you could say, serve the teacher when they are presenting the Dharma. The merit of all such actions is never wasted. These two kinds of action, pleasing the teacher, material offerings, and physical and verbal service, are considering the lowest and medium importance respectively. The third and best way of serving the teacher is to put the teachings into practice. And that's why it says, again, Jürgen Gelso says, the reason that practice is considered the best kind of service is that it fulfills the true purpose of the teacher's presence. All teachers, from Buddha Shakyamuni onward, have expounded the Dharma for one reason only, that beings might be liberated. Failure to practice their teachings frustrates this end. So that's where the entire purpose fails if nobody is putting it into practice. So if we just have the sort of externals of offering to the teacher and serving the teacher without practicing, then the actual purpose of the teacher is lost. 39 and 40 then reads, never look askance at what the teacher does. For most of the great siddhas of the noble land were menials or outcasts, evildoers, and even by the worst of standards, dissolute. If those who have not mastered their own minds ascribe faults to their teachers, then their sin is measureless. Although he knew by heart the 12 parts of the scripture, Bhikkhu Shuna Shatra, overmastered by the power of sin, perceived as false the actions of the Buddha, reflecting well thereon, reform yourself. So again, this is also going a little bit into the while you could say this section here is on the preliminaries, it also does speak a little bit about the Vajrayana culture in regards to the teacher. So Kangyur Rinpoche comments, spiritual masters have already accomplished their own aim. So that means they're already free. Anything that they do, we should think, comes from a place of complete egolessness. That's why they are our teachers. We don't go to the teacher as some kind of situation of bargaining, saying, okay, I'll please your ego if you please mine. There's the entire purpose of being a student of a teacher is that we're essentially engaging we're engaging the path of enlightenment for the purpose of becoming free of illusion, free of ego. And so the teacher should be understood as being completely egoless. And that's also where sometimes the teacher will, for our benefit, pretend to have particular likes and dislikes, like might like some, say, oh yeah, I really like this or really like that, or, have something, and like Tonsa Kangyur just says, something that the teacher just manifests in our world, and somehow we can connect with the teacher. This also allows for us to accumulate merit. But we should never think that the teacher actually has particular likes or dislikes. I think we talked about this last time anyway. So Kangyur Rinpoche then continues, it is now their task. So them being free, they've accomplished their own aim. It is now their task to labor for the sake of others. And that's also where we should never be shy to approach a teacher, because they're here for us. One time I asked Tugu Pema Wangel about, don't the teachers get tired of us coming around and always wanting teachings, blessings from them? And he just said they could have just stayed where they were, meaning they could have just remained in the Dharmakaya. So here they are, serving sentient beings. So in fact, nothing would please them more if there were beings asking for teachings for them applied themselves to these teachings. So as such, then they labor for others. It is important to understand that their various activities are displayed as appropriate to the inclinations and feelings of different beings and are the inconceivable operation of enlightened activities. So that's where teachers will display different forms according to the particular capacity of the students. Bearing this in mind, one should refrain from misinterpreting them. So we have this prayer we very often would recite, in regards to the teacher's actions. May we never have even a single moment of wrong view. Kangyur Rinpoche says the Siddhas of India, like Saraha, appeared for the most part as social outcasts. They adopted a way of life that was conventionally disreputable and lived without a concern for purity or impurity, getting their livelihood as menials of the lowest caste or as sinful hunters and fishermen, living in the humblest way possible. So we see how Sara, who was a Brahmin, he took up living with an outcast arrow maker's daughter. I don't know if she was outcast, but anyway, he was seen as sort of not behaving as Brahmins ought to behave. And also we have people like Tilopa, who famously, when Naropa met him, was living sort of where the fishermen would throw the refuse, all the guts and entrails of the fish that they had cleansed, they would throw into this sort of pile where Tilopa, he was sitting there and basically living off that. And so also we have Shawaripa, who was a hunter. We have Minapa, who was a fisherman. So there's persons that had lifestyle that we would say didn't really look that spiritual. But Kangyur Rinpoche then says, since their minds were undiluted, their actions were never wrong. We, by contrast, are as deluded as if we were under the power of hallucinogenic drugs. If we who have not gained freedom through the three doors of perfect liberation, meaning the nature of emptiness being signlessness, wishlessness, and emptiness, we commit an immeasurable fault. Bhikkhu Sunakshatra committed to memory the entire 12 collections of the teachings, but overpowered by his wrong views, he regarded as perfidious and underhand the actions of Buddha Shakyamuni himself, who obviously was utterly without fault and possessed of every excellence. So that's where, if we still have that kind of mind, then even seeing the Buddha, we would see faults with that person. This does happen around teachers. And that's particularly sometimes with the sort of some students who, for karmic reasons or one reason or another, happen to spend a lot of time with the teacher, not always having perfect outlook. I think sometimes I've quoted this famous quote from the 15th Karmapa, where he said, whoever sees me, the doors to the lower realms are shut. Whoever stays around me, the doors to the higher realms are shut. So, of course, around a Lama like that, like the Karmapa, then very often you had this sort of slightly court-like, like a court, like sort of like a royal court situation with all sorts of goings-ons. So that's where also very often you had students that would just come, see the Karmapa, see their guru once or twice, get some essential instructions, and go off, practice these, and achieve accomplishment. So Kangyur Rinpoche says, we should take all this to mind and confess and repair the slightest fluctuation in our faith. As it is said in Lekolo Chupa Reba, if in the visions of your dreams the teacher seems to have a fault, as soon as you awake, confess. For if you fail, the fault will grow and lead to hell of torment unsurpassed. So that, of course, is in the nth degree. Again, what we mean with confession is that the moment that we confess, we no longer are held by this as part of ourselves. We recognize the toxicity of it. We be determined to not perpetuate this particular pattern. We practice in order to not sort of engage that particular pattern. Thing is, if there's just a small seed, it could grow to more and more sort of wrong view. And that's where the actual, you could say, door to liberation all of a sudden becomes the door to a painful existence, where the guru, who represents complete awakening, us basically turning our back to awakening, then this leads to, in the nth degree, then a situation of great pain. Okay. Is the sound all right? Is the sound okay now? Gosh, don't know what to do about this sound situation. All right. Anyway, has been fine throughout. Oh, that's good. Well, then that would have just been on some individual systems. Okay, good. When we confess, does that mean that we let it go, so to speak? Well, no. It's a bit more than, well, yes, we do effectively. That is, in order for us to effectively let it go, we practice confession with these four powers, that we have regret, determination not to do it again, that we have somebody we do it in front, either you could say a teacher, or we visualize the teacher, but there's a sacred atmosphere on the basis of some presence, either real or visualized. And finally, then also our actions conform with that. Yeah, so these we call the four powers. So 41. If the teacher seems enraged, then understand that he has seen your faults. The time pertaining through reproof has come. Confess, resolving to reform yourself. For those with understanding do not stray into the demon's power. So this is also in this situation where we truly do see the teacher as the Buddha. We should be very grateful if the teacher is actually wrathful with us. We should even be sort of thinking, wow, he's kind to me. He's removing obstacles. Of course, if we have the situation, and this of course is also difficult in the modern egalitarian culture, that the teacher, is just supposed to be, our peer, then of course, then we're conditioned in ways in which this division that's basic to what we're talking about here might not be that easy to understand. And that's why in the modern situation, this is all a bit sort of tenuous in some way. But anyway, assuming that we could come across a situation in which we truly do have a teacher who is utterly pure, and we ourselves are completely committed to the path, and we have no impure perception of the teacher. We really see the teacher as entirely acting out of compassion. Yes, if the teacher then is wrathful with us, then it's something that we view as a purification. But then again, we should understand it's a privilege, really. The teacher wouldn't normally be angry with just anybody. The teacher would only be angry with someone that the teacher deeply, you could say, had that trusting relationship with. And as such, then, it's not something that would just happen to any old student, but it would really be something that happens to students that are very close to the teacher. So Kangyur Rinpoche says, if spiritual masters become apparently angry and scold their disciples, chiding them and behaving fiercely, the latter should understand that some fault has been perceived in them, a wrong thought perhaps, or negative behavior, and that the moment to practice discipline has come. They themselves vow never to commit the mistake again. They should never consider that the teacher is at fault. Intelligent disciples who thus understand the underlying wisdom and purpose behind the master's behavior will not fall under the power of demonic forces. So, because we have this classical example of Dogen Zyeshe Dorje who just berated Paltro Rinpoche, and Paltro Rinpoche sort of had the thought, is he smelling of alcohol? And immediately then Dawkins sort of took him by the head, dragged him around, spat at him, and called him an old dog. And at that moment, then Paltro Rinpoche had profound insight, and from then on actually adopted the name Old Dog, in deep appreciation for his teacher's wisdom. So that's sort of a classical example, but this happens. And if there's really a close relationship, yes, this could happen. But it really does, and this is where we need to have that sort of pure appreciation of the nature of what's happening, not thinking there's somebody who's actually held by anger or anything, but really just it's something that's done entirely out of concern and caring for the student. Enraged, very tricky. Nowadays, how do we distinguish between the teacher's kindness and potential abuse? Well, that's what I'm saying here, yeah. This is something where there should really be a complete trust. And nowadays, it's not easy. And we come from a culture in which we don't normally have that kind of, you could say, we weren't brought up with extraordinary individuals, for one. And second of all, we have a different culture, much more sort of egalitarian between teachers and students, So it's the modern situation is different, but then again, I think also many teachers are aware of that. But if there really were the right circumstances, we should appreciate that the wisdom that's implicit in this kind of action. Can we perceive certain outer behavior of the guru as wrong, unskillful, and not to be followed, and yet keep pure samaya? Well, if we're having a teacher with whom we have samaya, it means it's a Vajrayana relationship, and that's where we can't really have a Vajrayana relationship if the teacher, if we see the teacher as having any kind of ego, and that there would be any kind of flaw. So again, that's where it's completely fine in the Buddhist teaching to have an egalitarian relationship to the teacher. That's just not Vajrayana. So that's where we of course have spiritual guides that we respect, and we have all sorts of, you could say, admiration for them, but we still see them as having a bit of ego, a bit of ordinary, you could say, impulses and so forth. So that's fine. But then again, this is you could say somebody who's a spiritual friend and not a Vajrayana guru. So somebody is saying there's no sound. Is there no sound? Well, if there isn't, you probably couldn't hear what I'm saying. Okay. Okay. Sound is fine. Sound is good. All right. Excellent. There is sound. Also, I have a question. Can we understand the reason a siddha may manifest with distributable or aggressive lifestyle, such as a hunter, to be analogous to why a bodhisattva takes birth as a human in the first place? After all, human beings means we need to consume and take up space, carbon footprint, etc., in order to survive. So it assumes bodhisattvas and siddhas are more trying to meet us at our level so they can teach us effectively. That's right. That's right. But in general, we would associate with the bodhisattva someone who is profoundly kind and peaceful and compassionate. But the thing is, we understand siddhas are essentially bodhisattvas. But then again, siddhas would move further beyond just being, you could say, great beings. They would also engage in actions that are profoundly controversial and actually expose themselves to very difficult lifestyles. So the ancient siddhas, both in the Buddhist and also in the Shaiva traditions, typically would live in charnel grounds and so forth. So that's where we associate siddhas very much with unconventional lifestyle. Simply just taking up the lifestyle in which there's no distinguishing between pure and impure. So that's, you could say, a subcategory of the bodhisattvas. But yes, you're right. Being a bodhisattva is analogous to taking on the human situation. Yeah. How to behave in the presence of the teacher. Okay. By the way, there's a text called the stanzas of the verses of Guru Devotion by Ashvaghosha, I think it is, and it's translated. It's translated years ago by Khenpo Ngaon Dagye, I think, but it was published by the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives, and I think we can find it on the net. The verses of Guru Devotion. I think while we studied the Finding Rest in the Nature of the Mind, I uploaded it to the reading folder, but I'll find it and upload it again. So in there we have, I think it's something like 50 verses of how to behave around a teacher, and it's you can imagine there's some fair bit of detail, but here we have it sort of summed up. So 42 and 43 verses read: Do not stay sitting when the teacher stands, and when he sits, make offerings, inquiring for his ease. When he walks, attend him, not in front, and not behind, nor to his right. Disparaging his seat or steed will bring decline of merit. Slamming doors and affectation, angry scowls, to lie, to play the fool, to laugh or banter mindlessly, indifference to the teacher's presence, want of awe and reverence, these should all be shunned. In thoughts and words and deeds, attend your teacher quietly. So this is, again, something that comes completely organically. So we're not talking about some sort of, you could say, straitjacket of how we should behave, and it's incredibly awkward. This actually comes completely natural when we're in the presence of a really noble person. So all of this, you could say, makes sense. But then again, we might actually be insensitive to the teacher. We might actually be, we might be insensitive and loud and clumsy. And we might also be held by all sorts of ideas, like maybe we should impress the teacher, or maybe we should do this or that. And that's where this actually helps us to just have an inkling of how to behave. It actually makes things a lot easier when we have some what to do, what not to do. So here, Kangyur Rinpoche says, there is a certain etiquette to be followed in the presence of spiritual masters. When they stand up, you should not remain seated, but rise immediately. When they take their seat, you should inquire about their health and offer them refreshments and anything that might please them. Again, the teachers wouldn't have actual really desires for one thing or another, but to create a situation, they might say, yes, I'd like orange juice, I'd like tea, I'd like sake, I'd like, whatever. When they walk from place to place, you should sweep the ground before them and sprinkle it with scented water. Put down carpets and offer them a horse or some other conveyance. When accompanying them as an attendant, do not walk directly in front of them because it is disrespectful to show your back. Do not walk directly behind either, since this would mean treading on their footsteps. Neither should you walk on the right side, since that is a place of honor. You should rather keep to the left. If you verbally disparage the teacher's seat or horse, if you verbally disparage the teacher's seat or horse, if you step or sit on them, or if you complain about the sound of the teacher's voice, walk on the teacher's shadow, and so on, your merit will decline. So again, we're really just talking about a degree of refinement in terms of acting around the teacher. Again, this is, you could say, second nature in, you could say, Indo-Tibetan traditions, where there is a culture of deep appreciation for sublime beings. For the modern person, if we're new to this, it'll sound completely absurd. But if we're open to the sacred nature of the teacher, to just have our mind a little bit open with regards to the value of this actually allows for that we could receive so much. So it's about not so much like we do very often in sort of democratic context, like this is my right. I have the right to walk in front of the teacher. I have the right to, whatever, Here it's really more about, a deep subtle sensitivity about this person, that if he's a teacher, this is someone who we would be awed of. In addition, when the teacher is present, avoid slamming doors, wearing extravagant ornaments and the like, and never lose your temper. Never lie, and always be moderate and sensible in your actions. Loud laughter and impertinent, over-familiar banter should be avoided. Of course, the teacher might encourage that you just let it loose, that you just, they might encourage them, but unless it's encouraged, we might actually find ourselves just being ridiculous and completely missing the point. So that's where, again, we shouldn't be on edge, but we should just be sensitive to the situation. Kangyur Rinpoche says, never be indifferent to the teacher's presence, behaving as though you were with an ordinary person without respect and awe. Follow your teacher with humility and keep your thoughts, words, and deeds on a tight rein. So again, this is just from a place of having deep respect, awe, humility, devotion. Then this all comes completely organically, naturally. 44. Those who hate and scorn your teacher, you should not befriend. Put a stop to their behavior if you can. For if you keep on easy terms with them, the great strength of their sin will taint your own samaya. So again, this is like we talked about before. You could say friends that evil friends, or friends that are not that helpful for our path. You should not form ties of friendship with people who revile and criticize the teacher with animosity and dislike, even if they're generous benefactors and are kind to you. Again, in the modern context, it's difficult to come across people who just right away get what the teacher is about. When I remember I began my studies of Buddhism, none of my friends had the slightest sort of idea of what this was on about. And they were sort of mainly just prone to be rather sort of disrespectful, would rather enjoy playfully, to see if they could push my buttons, if they could say rude things about the teacher, or sort of just be, and really it came from a place not of deep evil, but just, you could say, of a cultural lacking, that they're just, just didn't have any place, and it just seemed weird. So you can't regard these kind of people as evil, or you could say enemies of the teacher. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about people who really understand what this is about and who nevertheless insist that there's something profoundly wrong with the teacher and so on. Also, again, this is of course conditioned. So there should be compassion for these kind of people, but at the same time also, if we could do something about it, yes. If we can turn their mind around, yes. But if we can't, then probably there's not much benefit from sticking around them. He says, Kangyur Rinpoche says, try to restrain their evil behavior either with suitable words or even with force, if necessary, if that's going to help. But if the situation is beyond your control, avoid relating to such people on easy terms. If you do otherwise, the great strength of their evil actions as well as demonic influences will rot your samaya. So again, this is something that will come quite organically. We'll just not feel inclined to be around people like that. But this involves a breach of samaya through relation with others. So actually there's a Tibetan term there, but it's not really expounded upon, but it's just that you could say this will undermine and just, you could say, contaminate us. Actually, we'll naturally just feel unwell around people like that. Again, this is something that I think we organically will navigate. The defect of this kind of association is described in the Tantra Dutsi Jungwa, where it says, if the Vajra master is reviled, prevent this using mild or wrathful means. But if you are unable, you should stop your ears. Do not associate or speak with those who pay the teacher insults, or else you too will boil in the lower realms. So this will just bring us down. Adjust yourself to your companions like a belt. Be like salt. Be easy to absorb. Like posts, be strong in your endurance. Befriend the teacher's retinue and all the Vajra kin. So, Kangyur Rinpoche says, do not make distinctions among the teacher's attendants and disciples, liking some and disliking others. Okay. Not easy, but, but probably a good thing to do. And do not make a nuisance of yourself. Try rather to be like a belt, fitting easily with any company, and like salt, easily adaptable to anyone, high or low, influential or obscure. Be a pillar of strength against weariness, irritation, and any kind of assault. This is how to serve the teacher and to respect the teacher's attendants and benefactors, as well as the Vajra kindred. In brief, we could think what would please the teacher, and certainly it wouldn't please the teacher if we do then have animosity with some and we have sort of proximity with others, but really just that we get along with everybody. This helps the teacher a lot. We would say this prolongs the teacher's life, and when there's conflict among what we call Vajra siblings, this really shortens the teacher's life. This is something that distresses the teacher. 46. Like swans that swim in perfect pools, like bees that taste the nectar in the flowers, be tireless in your constant and impeccable attendance, and having pleased the teacher, taste, through faith, his perfect qualities. Kangyur Rinpoche says you should aspire to dwell constantly in the company of spiritual masters, custodians of the treasury of Dharma, like swans living in beautiful creeks and flower-filled pools that gently taste the weeds and plants, and like bees that sip the nectar of the blossoms without damaging their color or perfume. It is marvelous indeed to be able to observe the proper conduct as just described, leaving aside all incorrect behavior and cultivating every wholesome attitude. Attend the spiritual master steadfastly, without weariness, trying not to be the cause of displeasure. Taste by the power of faith alone the qualities of the master's realization. So that's when interacting with the teacher, we needn't make a big splash. We could simply just like bees and like the swans that just take what's absolutely necessary without damaging where they're living or without damaging the flower in any way. And being constant in attending the teacher, we're creating the best conditions for the teacher, obviously, and for the Sangha in general, but also for ourselves. We'll we feel so much better when we have this, you could say, purity in terms of perception, when we don't entangle ourselves in our projections about others. And particularly then on the basis of our openness and, you could say, pure samaya, by the power of this purity that comes then when we engage in the master's, you could say, mandala or environment on the premise of the master's wishes, that we're not going against the master's wishes, that we really abide by the entire intention of what the master is about and what the master has created in terms of the situation, that when we have that, when we're abiding by that and deeply appreciative, then yes, then we'll taste the teacher's realization. We'll have what called blessing. There will be the possibility of engaging that which lies beyond the ordinary concepts and language. So 47 then reads, engaging truly in the actions of enlightenment, holy beings make supreme accumulation of both merit and of wisdom to serve and help them in their work, to carry messages and sweep the floor. Even tasks like these bear fruit and of accumulation are the supreme path. All activities of the teachers of the Mahayana are geared to one thing only, enlightenment. Not one of their activities diverges from the 6 paramitas. Having embraced the uncommon path of means and wisdom, such masters practice accumulation of merit associated with extraordinary skillful means. For instance, by making offerings, distributing charity, building temples, and explaining and listening to the Dharma. They also practice the accumulation of merit. They also practice the accumulation of wisdom. So for our sake, we'll have teachers that actually demonstrate how to practice the path. And again, there's not a moment where their intention is sort of flawed in any way, and there's not only one thing that they wish, which is to set their students free. So this is the hallmark of a genuine guru. So that's where everything they do will be reflections of what essentially constitutes the path, the accumulation of merit and the accumulation of wisdom. And so being around teachers like that, they very often will very generously demonstrate how to do that. If we're around great teachers, we'll see how all their money, in fact, goes to benefiting others, or to, in one way or another, creating circumstances for benefiting others or benefiting the teachings and so forth. So they also practice the accumulation of wisdom. They seal their activities with the understanding that the subject, object, and action itself are lacking in inherent existence, and they rest in the sphere of ultimate reality. So that means when teachers like this, they make offerings to you could say, great causes, or they're helping others, they don't have sort of a, like, there's no strings attached. They're not thinking, oh, I'm really wonderful. They don't have that. And that's what is particularly great about teachers, this absence of the, what we call threefold concept, subject, object, and action. And this is essentially the nature of wisdom. There's not that duality that thinks, I did this for so-and-so. Kangyur Rinpoche says, if you associate yourself with the activities of such masters, participating in a material way, or helping them physically and verbally, or meditating with them and so forth, all your actions will be in harmony with their activity. It is thus that the accumulation of merit and wisdom of both master and disciple are perfected at one and the same time. So if we see the masters doing something wonderful, and we can also see how they are not bloated with pride for being in one way or another, having particular qualities, then just rejoicing in that, that in itself already is a great accumulation of merit and assisting. We shouldn't sort of be pushing, we might sort of see a lot of people wanting to help the teacher. We shouldn't be out there sort of like elbowing our way. We'll just be there if it's needed. If others are already attending to the teacher and doing a good job, the teacher is pleased, then we just rejoice. We needn't be pushy, but see teacher, hey teacher, I did this for you, or please notice me, and all of that. We don't need to do that. We just quietly, if things are working well, we just rejoice from afar. Okay, reasons for serving the teacher. Why so? Because the practice based upon the teacher holds within it refuge in a field of merit, the outer and inner yogas that accomplish the guru, and the practices of generation and perfection. For the teacher is the Buddha, as the sutras and the tantras all declare. Okay. Essentially, all the various practices, they are contained within the teacher and within the, you could say, culture of practice around the teacher. Kangyur Rinpoche says, all the energy put into serving the spiritual master, carrying messages, even sweeping the house, is never a meaningless waste of effort. It is the supreme path whereby the accumulations are perfected and the fruit of liberation is attained. There is a reason for this. Whichever visualized field of merit you use, whether peaceful or wrathful, when taking refuge or generating bodhicitta, if you consider that the field is the display of the teacher's mind, this is the outer level of Guru Yoga. I've never come across this before. Generally, when we talk about taking refuge in the field of merit, I've never heard of it as referred to as wrathful. But I guess we definitely have the wrathful teacher. Yeah, actually, you do have refuge trees sometimes where Padmasambhava stands as a wrathful figure. I guess that's it. And also we should also understand any deity, whether it's peaceful or wrathful, of course, is the manifestation of the teacher. So yes, so when taking refuge or generating bodhicitta, either taking refuge or generating bodhicitta with the field of merit as the witness, if you consider that the field is a display of the teacher's mind, this is the outer level of Guru Yoga. And of course, when we approach the preliminary practices, the Ngundro, from the very start, really, it is all about the devotion to the teacher. So we could say from the very start, the entire Ngundro is really about Guru Yoga. If in order to purify the mind, you meditate upon the teacher seated at the crown of your head as the embodiment of all the Buddhas, this is the second and inner level of Guru Yoga. If, as a means to receive the direct transmission of his blessings, you meditate on the spiritual master in your heart center, this is the secret level of Guru Yoga. Finally, to train in the generation stage, consider that the uncontrived state of your body, speech, and mind, and the three secrets of the teacher arise inseparably as the Idam deity is the most secret level of Guru Yoga. So we engage with the presence of the teacher in various ways, and in various ways we mingle with the teacher's wisdom. And this is then what we further integrate through the practice of the yoga of the development stage practice. So to train in the perfection stage is the conclusion of all these practices. You mingle your mind with the teacher's wisdom mind and rest therein, never diverging from primordial wisdom. So this is the ultimate way of the Guru Yoga, the inconceivable radiant clarity of the ultimate nature. Becoming acquainted with this natural state of the wisdom mind of the teacher, totally free from mental activity, all this is the ultimate level of Guru Yoga. So you could say right from the start, everything really is about engaging the teacher's wisdom. The teacher, then again, in the Vajrayana, is not seen as some external person, and the teacher's wisdom and some qualities that's privy to the teacher and divorced from our own. But in fact, the teacher is just seen as the outer manifestation of our own wisdom. So we wouldn't be able to appreciate it if it wasn't that we had this wisdom within ourselves. But because we fail to properly live by it and properly abide by this wisdom, we see it in someone who has fully manifested this. And then we attend the teacher and mingle our own body, speech, and mind with the teacher's body, speech, and mind from the point of view that they primordially are inseparable. So this is then engaged in various ways where we then externally, through the preliminaries, engage this vision, and in terms of the main practice, we engage this on the basis of the development stage practices where there's references in terms of body, speech, and mind, and also in the ultimate sense beyond any mental constructs at all. So Kangyur Rinpoche says, this shows how the essence of all practice is present in the practice of Guru Yoga. For this reason, the sutras of the Mahayana teach that one must acquire the habit of seeing the teacher as the Buddha, fully awakened. This is the teaching in the Tantras also. It is written in the Chakdor Wangkure Ju, which is then the Tantra of the empowerment of Vajrapani, where it says, Lord of secrets, how must the disciple look upon his teacher? He must consider him in the same way as he considers the Buddha, the Blessed Lord. In the same vein, the Tantra Namkha Longyanki Gyu says, meditation on the teacher is meditation on the Dharmakaya. Compared with this, all meditation on 100,000 deities is seen as nothing. Therefore, every act of wholesome Dharma, hearing, teaching, meditating and upholding, Torma offering and all the rest are but preparation for the Guru Yoga. For the teacher is the glorious Buddha of the past, the present, and all future time. So understanding the nature of the teacher, we also understand that the qualities of the teacher are inseparable from those of the Buddhas. If we ever encounter the Buddhas, the historical Buddha Shakyamuni, Padmasambhava, Longchenpa, Jigme Lingpa, and so forth, they wouldn't be able to offer us anything except the most precious thing they have to offer, which is their speech, their teaching. And this is, in fact, what our teacher is giving to us. The Buddha couldn't do more for us. So that's why we would say the teacher's qualities is equal to all of that, and yet the teacher's kindness exceeds that of all the Buddhas of the past. So 49 says, most foolish people meditate on images they have contrived. They do not serve the teacher while he's present. They claim to meditate upon the natural state, but do not know the teacher's mind. Alas, their actions and their aims are contraries. And strange to say, although without devotion, they hope to meet him in the bardo. So again, this is where you could say the practice of the Dharma has sort of become just an empty, hollow style of behavior, where we're just talking about things, but actually there's no genuine quality behind it. And there's also no certainty. If we're claiming to meditate on the natural state without having properly mingled with the teacher, we are actually intending one thing, but we're actually doing something that's not going to help at all. So that's why you could say the inspiration might have some intelligence, but the application is lacking, you could say, the skill. So that's where then what we would say intention and action, they end up being in conflict. And then there's this thing, and again, this might be just, you'd say, part of a cultural practice and say, oh yeah, I hope to meet the great teacher in the bardo, but really without any sort of real heart. So Kangyur Rinpoche says, the majority of people, ignorant and foolish, meditate on pictures of their teachers made by themselves or others. So we could have all sorts of this sort of like of pictures of the teachers. Just like when we're kids, we have all these sort of idols, you know, we have posters of, you know, people that we think are cool. And then later when we are Buddhists, then similarly, we fill up our rooms with all sorts of pictures. So that's again externalizing the teacher really. And he says, but they do not actually serve their teachers devotedly and in practical ways while they are still alive and present in the world. When their teachers die, in order to create a good impression of themselves, they have reliquaries made of gold and silver. So there might even be sort of annoyance that the teacher is still there. you know, that the teachers, without really serving the teacher, just sort of having them as a reference point. Then once the teacher is gone, then it's like, oh yes, the teacher, you know. Thus, their deeds and their intentions do not correspond. They say that they are meditating on the profound ultimate reality, but they have not the slightest clue of the innermost profundity of the teacher's mind, a state utterly beyond distraction and meditation. On the contrary, they put their confidence in the meditation of idiots clinging to true existence. So that's where just holding on to ideas of what meditation without actually having properly investigated what really is meant with that, investigating the teacher's, what the teacher meant, really sort of going into depth with it, really looking at their own mind as sort of like, you could say, like a laboratory where we see what is happening with my mind, and trying to align that with what the teacher has been teaching, and then arriving at clarity. But not doing that, then just having some sort of idea of what meditation is that doesn't actually contradict or in any way purify what's the real trouble, which is this belief in a solid reality in terms of both our person and also the phenomenal world. As such, then, Kangyur Rinpoche says, their worldly, discursive mind tried to accomplish a wisdom that lies beyond the intellect itself. And that's where I would say, if the cause is conceptual, how could we ever think that the result would be non-conceptual? Kangyur Rinpoche says, what a foolish waste of time. The discursive mind is completely incapable of producing such a result. Such people have no pure perception, they're destitute of yearning and devotion, and yet they expect to meet their teacher in the bardo. Did you ever hear such nonsense? So, not mincing his words here. So, what is the difference between primordial wisdom and that we are accumulating? Well, the primordial wisdom is the Buddha nature that is basic to who we are. It's our undiluted primordial basic ground. And presently, we are like somebody who is polishing a window, and we are trying to get to the window itself, but we first have to remove what's on the window. And that's what we're doing with the accumulations. What are the three secrets of the teacher? Are they body, speech, and mind? Yes, that's right. And we would say the condition, the condition of appearance throughout both samsara and nirvana is body, speech, and mind. And we talk about then Vajra body, Vajra speech, and Vajra mind. As you could say, the natural display of the ground is never moves from the ground, but the natural display is body, speech, and mind. And so that's where we would say this body, speech, and mind, when it's not contaminated by confusion, when it's, you could say it's in the primordial, embraced by an insight into the original ground of reality, then it arises as the Vajra, body, speech, and mind. And that's where the moment that we engage with memory of the teacher or think of the teacher, then naturally also our own being is permeated by the you could say the nature of the teacher. It's like, you know, I was reading a review of the new Top Gun movie, and the reviewer, he says, when the lights came on, he sort of what was the word again? He sort of swaggered out of the cinema, and he jumped into the seat of his car, and he gunned his engine, and then he said he crawled out of the parking lot. But you see, the thing is, we get influenced by these circumstances. I remember once there was a really violent movie, and what happened is afterwards, these kids, after having seen this violent movie, they went out and was sort of smashing things. So when we're in the presence of the teacher, it's interesting. We actually begin to sit straight, we begin to you could say there's just, we say it's a bit like in the sandalwood forest. Even ordinary wood begins to smell like sandalwood. So if we're around our teacher, it's interesting to see that our body, the way we hold ourselves physically, the way that we speak, if we're really in awe of the teacher, if there's really a condition of respect taking place, you know, if we're completely focused on someone or something with a complete openness, then we align ourselves with that. And there's a yoga that takes place. In this case, we're talking about then the Guru Yoga, where we align ourselves with a purity of the body, a purity of the speech, a purity of the mind. So as such, then, the body, speech, and mind of the teacher is not external to us, but is really found as something that innately is basic to our being. The teacher enables us to align ourselves with our primordial purity on all levels, including body, speech, and mind. Okay, we'll conclude at this point here, I think. Next conclusion. Okay, dedicate. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we're born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the Holy Gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together. Excuse me. Okay, see you next week. Okay. Thank you.